Treasurer Jim Chalmers is set to release the mid-year budget update next week. As of the end of October, we know the deficit widened to almost $33 billion due to a deterioration in the budget bottom line on the back of rising government spending, particularly on wages. So to discuss government spending and the fiscal outlook, I'm joined by Associate Professor Mark Humphery-Jenner from UNSW. Mark, good to see you again. Let's start with government spending. I mean, how much has it really accelerated over the past few years?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me. And it depends on which sector of government spending you're looking at. So you've got areas like the NDIS, which have really blown out. And it depends on exactly which year you're looking at, but it's running at roughly double GDP growth, give or take a little bit, which is a problem because if it's increasing faster than your revenues are increasing, how do you pay for it? Other areas have fluctuated a bit. So we're looking at energy subsidies. They obviously came in and then expired after the election for clear reasons, and now those are unwinding. So you're going to see a reduction in spending on those. Defence has been a little bit all over the place, but you're seeing potential moves to sell defence assets. So we're talking places in Paddington, for example, real estate. The obvious issue of that is when you sell assets to pay your operating expenses, well, how do you finance the operating expenses when you run out of assets? But government spending has absolutely increased. Just look at the sheer amount of jobs that rely on government to exist. 80% of new jobs created rely on the non-market sector, which is basically either directly from government or funded by government. Spending has absolutely increased.
And the defence thing in particular, there's a lot of pressure now on our government to lift defence spending from our big ally, the US, sort of hinging on this AUKUS deal.
Absolutely. And they're looking for ways to finance this. Now, selling some assets might make some sense right now, right? But say you sell Paddington Barracks. Clearly there's heritage around that. You probably can't sell all of it, but say you sell a chunk of that. What happens next year when you need to find some money? It's like, say, for example, you're running an issue with not earning enough to pay your mortgage, but you sell your house. You still need to live somewhere. You still have operating expenses. It's kind of the same with defence. So you do run into those issues. Now, with defence spending, they're definitely under pressure to increase that. President Trump has wanted all allies to bring defence spending to about 3.5% of GDP. At the moment, Australia has been able to avoid too much blowback, likely because AUKUS involves Australia directly paying money to the United States.
A lot of money.
A lot of money. A lot of money, which is probably giving us some cover.
So what can the government do? What are some austerity measures that could, get the budget back into a good position?
Well, there's really two parts of it, the revenue line and the expense line. Now, the expense line is clearly going to need to involve some degree of at least reducing the growth of the government sector, broadly speaking. And here we're talking the number of employees within the government sector. Now, there are some great employees and there are some not so great employees. And there are some employees that might be good but spend a lot of money. So, for example, does Julie Inman Grant need to spend over $1 million to go and travel around the world? Does Annika Wells need to spend $100,000 to go and do a 6-minute speech in New York? Now, clearly, one's a bureaucrat, one's a politician. But still, it gives us an idea. There's a lot of spending. And every time you grow the bureaucracy, you end up with that type of spending potentially coming in. But not only that, when you're running a team in the public sector, really any sector, you increase your prestige, your status, and your promotion likelihood by growing your own team. So you end up with this, effectively this bloat occurring that's difficult to control. At the moment, they're trying to do that, but it's a challenge. If we look at the revenue side, this is really tricky because what the government needs to do is avoid what's happening in the UK. The UK has entered what I call a death spiral. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, she decided the way to solve revenue problems was to hike taxes. So they hiked capital gains tax and removed the non-dom status, which doesn't really apply in Australia. We don't have an equivalent. What happened? Capital gains tax receipts fell by 10%. So you can see here they increased tax rates, receipts fell. Now, the reason for this with capital gains tax is money fled the UK and also transaction volume decreased. So when you realize you get less equity from selling an asset, you sell fewer assets, thereby raising less capital gains tax revenue. Now, we've got a capital gains tax review coming next year. I fear they're going to go down the same path. Now, Australia has currently the highest capital gains tax rate in the world, caps out at 47%. The long-term rate is 23.5%. Now, I challenge anyone who is watching this, go and look, just do a Google search. PwC has a good table of this. Look up all of the capital gains tax rates around the world. Compare Australia to countries run by literal communist parties. I'm not joking here. Compare it to China and to Vietnam, run by the Communist Party of China and also the Communist Party of Vietnam. look at what the capital gains tax rates are. And if people do that Google search, they'll find that in China, it's 20%. In Vietnam, it was 20% until CGT was scrapped and replaced with a 2% transaction tax. In Hong Kong, Singapore, New Zealand, it's 0%. Australia needs to be really careful about avoiding that death spiral. So the way to solve the revenue problem is through growth. You need to generate more economic growth by removing a lot of regulatory burdens. So we talked about super just before. Well, that's an area where there's a lot of impediments. That levy will potentially create issues.
Mark Humphery-Jenner, we've run out of time. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.